asked you how to explain grief with one word, I'm pretty sure most people would say sadness, or maybe emptiness. Both are valid answers, because both are things you feel when you grieve. For me, however, the thing I felt when I was told my biological dad died was a very specific type of anger. Anger and grief isn't something talked about that often. You'll see it in movies sometimes, where someone dies, and the scene that follows is the main character being angry, but that isn't necessarily anger directed at the person who died, but the reasons surrounding why the character has died. My name is Staggbones, and this is I Was Angry My Dad Died, an essay in grief. For me, I think it's safe to say I don't have any good memories of my father. I didn't know him. My mom had me when she was 19, and roughly a year later she fled the state with me specifically to get away from him. I'm not going to elaborate on what things transpired that made my mom feel the need to run. That's her story to tell, not mine, but I'm sure those of you who know will understand. And because of that, growing up, I didn't have a dad. I think I was 8 or 9 when I met a guy who would eventually become my stepfather, but for a majority of my growing up period, I was one of the few kids in my elementary school that didn't have a dad present. It was my mom and my grandmother who raised me. One of the earliest memories I can recall associated with my father was it was Father's Day at school, and me and the kids in class were given the art project to make cards for their dads, except for me. I was the only kid in class who didn't get to make a card. My household just didn't celebrate Father's Day. There was no father to celebrate. The closest we got was calling my grandfather. I remember coming home to my mom pretty upset, asking her why I couldn't make a card and just mail it to my dad. I was aware that I had one, but I didn't know why I was different from the other kids in that regard. I was in the 1st grade. She sat me down and told me that he wasn't a good person and that it was dangerous for me to try to reach out and that I shouldn't under any circumstances. The next memory I have of my dad was probably around the 7th grade. It was 1 a.m. and I was on my Nintendo 3DS, and I'm not sure what compelled me to do this, but I looked up his name on Facebook, and I found him. His name, everything he was posting, living his life completely carefree, and that really upset me. I cried pretty much immediately. He seemed so happy. He had a new girlfriend or a wife, I couldn't tell, and he seemed like he was doing well. And even though he wasn't a good man, a part of me wished that he was thinking about me. I think it's natural in humans to want to be recognized by your parents or wanted in some capacity, and there wasn't a single sign of me on his page. I cried for probably an hour and a half. The last memory I have surrounding my father was when I was sitting at a restaurant with my Nana. I don't remember why the conversation took the turn it did, but it landed on the topic of my biological father, and I started to vent to her about how I wanted to meet him, how upset I was that he didn't seem to care. My Nana told me that maybe when I was older, I could send him a letter or something. It's not a smart idea, but I don't blame her for offering this idea as a way to soothe my mind regarding the issue. I have an issue with memory. Most of my memories, unless they were extremely impactful, are foggy at best. The day my mom told me that my dad died, however, is extremely clear. I was sitting on my bed playing Animal Crossing New Horizons. I was listening to Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles, which is pretty ironic considering the tone of the upcoming conversation. It was around 12 or 1 in the afternoon, and my mom had just come home from her work break, and she came into my room to ask if she could tell me something. She explained to me that my biological dad had died and asked me if I needed anything or if I wanted to talk about it. I didn't really have anything to say. I think at first it just didn't register. I didn't know the guy. We were strangers. The most we shared was DNA, and that was it. She told me I could text her if I needed anything, but that she had to go back to work, and she did. I sat with my thoughts for almost the whole day, processing it, and finally it hit me. My dad had died, and I was angry. Trying to explain the type of anger that I felt after finally processing everything is difficult. It was a type of anger that made me want to scream and punch something, to tear things apart. I was mad at him for dying. I think I was angry for a lot of reasons. One of them was that I felt that he got off scot-free. He'd hurt my mom, he'd hurt me, and he'd caused so much pain for me while growing up simply from him not being there. but also because he dared to be there in the first place. He should have been in jail for the things that he did, and that's where he should stay. Death was an escape for him, to not have to own up and face the things that he did. Another reason I was angry was that grieving over a father was something that people got to experience. They get to say their goodbyes, they get to go to funerals and talk with family and find comfort in gathering. But for me, I didn't know him. We didn't go to his funeral. We didn't find comfort in gathering because we didn't talk to that side of the family. It was just me and my mom. I don't know if my stepdad did this consciously or not, but he spent a lot of time with me after that, making sure I was okay. I wasn't, but the presence of a dad in my life was greatly appreciated. And the final reason I think I was so angry was that he took away my power in the situation. Though I likely wouldn't have reached out to him, him being alive always gave me the option to reach out to him, to yell at him, to make him notice me, to understand that I was there, that I was a person, that whether or not we knew each other personally, we knew each other regardless, if only a little bit. I found his eulogy a couple of years ago, shortly after he died. I was doing research for a paper in college, and in it, it talked more about him. It had my name in there. It said that he was survived by me, and I realized that the people that write the eulogies rarely know anything about who they're writing them for. I found out that he, many years ago, was the focus of a news story in the town. He was hailed as a hero, as a survivor, and it was weird seeing this man praised for so many things when he wasn't any of what these people were saying. Anger and grief is something I think everyone experiences, but it's rarely ever the most forefront emotion, at least in my experience. It takes a lot of things to create something like that. I'm still grieving, I think. I'm still angry, definitely. I have so many things I want to say to him that I know I will never get to. I think there's a lot of stigma around grief that most people don't realize. But I notice that people treat you differently if they find out that you're angry someone died. I suppose that's a reasonable reaction. People can't control when they die in most scenarios, so to be angry at them for dying seems distasteful. Grief is a multifaceted beast that needs to be approached from different angles. Anger isn't something that happens because of one thing, but often a culmination of many things. Many tiny snowballs rolling into something much bigger until it explodes. If you think about it, grief is the same way. Many tiny snowballs. The starting snowball, of course, is the loss of something, but it can grow bigger from many things, like finding a photo of what you lost, or picking up your phone to call someone who isn't there anymore, or even just by thinking about them. I am okay now. I wasn't for a while, but I've sat with and processed my feelings as much as I can on my own. I'm not sure why I decided to make this video, except that I know how much it would have helped me to see someone talking about their own anger with someone's death. I felt very alone when it happened. My mom wasn't angry like I was, and she was the only person I knew who knew him. I felt guilty, and as such, I didn't talk about it, which is extremely important when you're grieving, to talk about it. It's an interesting thing, grieving someone you hate. I hope that by making this video, someone out there will find comfort in the fact that they are not alone. That a lot of people feel this type of anger, and it's confusing and it hurts, but you are not alone, and you are okay to be mad. Thank you for watching my video. I know I completely dropped off the face of the planet for a while, all for a lot of different reasons, but I might talk about that later. I'm not sure if I want to come back to YouTube just yet, but inspiration struck me with this one, so to speak. It's sort of a different tone. I promise I'm not always this depressing. And thank you for everybody that came back. If you have any experience with anger or other strange things that you felt in grief, things that maybe aren't generally seen as okay, like happiness or relief, etc., feel free to share them in the comments below. I'm sure someone out there will read it and find comfort in that, and you might find comfort in sharing your own story. Grief is a community thing, and we should do our best to help each other. Thank you.